Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari. This is the Great Big History Podcast. In our season called Progress, Backlash, Health, and Trauma, we're in for a doozy today. What if the Nazis had won? Well, that's the Assyrian Empire. The Assyrian Empire, genocide, trauma, and vengeance. So what happened to the Assyrian peoples during the Bronze Age? The Bronze Age collapse. Well, bad things happened. Assyria is located in the middle of nowhere. It's up on the upper Tigris. It is the frontier of frontiers. The Euphrates is the more important river, the one in the south. The Tigris is the one in the north. It's a faster flowing river. It's harder to use for agriculture. And remember, Sumer and the earliest cities are way in the south, near the Gulf, near the Persian Gulf. So if you're up near the mountains in the far north on the Tigris, you are not important. You are in the middle of nowhere. So you should say when the Bronze Age collapse happens, these people should kind of be safe. Right? There's no reason to invade them except they're on the Tigris, which means they're on the way to Babylon. And if you want to go to Babylon, where the stuff is, and you're coming from the north, you are going right through the heart of Assyria. So the Bronze Age collapse brought wave upon wave upon wave of invaders. And this is a massive psychological trauma because the kings and the society could not protect people. How can we be safe? They're coming in, they're stealing my daughter, they're burning down my ranch, they're killing or eating all of my pigs. Like, I am left with nothing but disaster. But see, the people don't want to stay because, again, Assyria is the middle of nowhere. They're on their way to Babylon. So they just come through like locusts and wreck everything. Take what they need, and they're gone. So the Assyrians were left behind. So unlike other peoples who are destroyed and disappeared and are uprooted and themselves become part of the people on the move, the Assyrians are left to pick up the pieces. And their response, their backlash to that trauma was to choose violence, was an offensive response, not a defensive one. They wanted to create an army that couldn't lose. Now, to do that, you have to create a society that can create an army that cannot lose. They chose violence. And so the Assyrians become the first professional army, the first militarized society where all men are essentially soldiers. And then they use that army to murder anyone who might threaten them. They send it north across the mountains. They send it south against Babylon. They cross the desert to invade Egypt. They go everywhere. They are conquerors of the world. They win. So what are the results of Assyrian violence? The first is military innovation. Combined arms. They could fight in a way no one else could fight. Their pieces, the chariots, the infantry, the archers, could all work together. I'm going to go back for a second. If we take a look at our images on the video, we have archers, these stone reliefs. We have our spearmen. We have our infantry. And then who's coming in? The chariots. Now, most armies had maybe one of those three and didn't have all three. But even if they had multiple parts, when the battle began, they said, forward, charge. And each piece did its own thing. The archers shot, just trying to shoot. The infantry marched forward on its own. They didn't work together because they'd have to be trained. And no one has time for that. They could be trained. They had time to be trained maybe in their own weapons. They didn't have time to train with the other units too. Combined arms is how modern professional armies fight. Our army fights like this in the 21st century AD. The Assyrians were doing it in 600, 700 BC. Nearly 3,000 years ago. Very modern. No one else fights this way. So the Assyrians win. They conquer the world. They conquered the world that they understood. They conquered the map. They laid out a map and they said, we own all of it. They conquered the map as they understood it. And then how did they run things? What did they do? Terrorism and slavery. Remember, the goal isn't just to win. It's to make sure no one ever threatens them again. So how do you make sure they don't threaten you again? The first thing is terrorism. You scare them into never picking up arms against you. That if they do fight you, you will utterly destroy them. You will exterminate them. You will commit genocide against their culture. The second thing they do is slavery. Why? Why slavery? Because remember, the Assyrians aren't farmers anymore. They're all soldiers. So where are they getting their food from? Where are they getting their taxes from? What is the system that's going to support having 30,000 men not be farmers, but be soldiers? And that means slavery. Other people have to do the work. So conquered people had to pay Assyria for protection. And they paid for it in money and food so that Assyria funds their army, which means defeated peoples paid first, and then they got what was left over. So health was a weapon. Malnutrition was used. You saw this in A Bug's Life, right? The locusts take the seeds, and if the ants can't feed themselves, then they starve. And tough luck for the ants. The locusts don't care. And so malnutrition, food, starvation, health was used as a weapon. See, if they don't eat that much, right? If they eat less calories, then they won't be as strong, like physically as strong. So when we fight them, and remember, everyone's fighting hand-to-hand combat, we'll be stronger, physically stronger in our muscles than they are. Health was now a weapon. It was a strategy. The Assyrians not only attacked politics, but they attacked culture. They built a terror capital, Nineveh, a city on the banks of the Tigris. But they didn't build it. See, they needed a big capital because Babylon exists, right? So they had to show off that they are as tough as Babylon, right? So you needed a city that was big. The problem is no one wants to live in Nineveh. No one who's not Assyrian wants to go there. And so what they built it as was a terror city, a memorial. It was a city full of war memorials. And the idea of this was to remind you of our victories against your grandpa. We carried off your gods, your books, your trophies. Take a look at the image, and we have the steels, the books that they carried off. We have an artistic work of them carrying off one of the Babylonian gods, a Babylonian god you can go and see in the London Museum. That's where my picture comes from. So the Assyrians carried it off, and then 2,000 years later, the British carried it off, and now you could go to London and see it yourself. They built a great library, and you go, oh, that's nice, a great library full of 31,000 texts. That's nice. Except it's not nice because it was used as domination. It was filled with stolen texts, and no one was allowed to read them. So even the library was a symbol of violence and power. The Assyrians made ordinary things weapons. This is what the Nazis will do. This is what fascism will do. Ordinary things become weapons to be used against their enemies. Nobody, and I have to emphasize this, nobody had fought like this. That doesn't mean people were nice to each other. No, they would destroy your city, right? They would take your food, right? They might enslave you. Yes. But what the Assyrians were doing was threatening the complete extermination of your people. And if you weren't exterminated, then you were starved, you were displaced, your books, your knowledge was stolen from you, and you didn't have access to it. The only thing that the Assyrians cared about was telling you about you, was to remind you through memorials how defeated you were, how disempowered you were. Nobody. This is not just beating somebody up. It's rubbing their face in it. And people didn't act like that. First of all, it's exhausting to act like that. Look at what we have. We have these two texts from Sennacherib. At the command of the god Ashur, the great lord, I rushed upon the enemy like the approach of a hurricane. So this is not passive. This is full steam ahead. I put them to rout. Notice, I turned them back. Notice the goal is not to kill every last one of them, though they will if they have to. It's to make them run away. I transfixed the troops of the enemy with javelins and arrows. Transfix means I stuck them to the earth. Habandudasha, the commander-in-chief of the king of Elam, together with his nobles, I cut their throats like sheep. Now remember, the people who are going to read this are butchers, are farmers. They know what it is to kill an animal for food. And that also means Habandudasha did not got captured. He did not get killed in battle. I cut their throats like sheep. Means I captured him. And I sacrificed him. I cut his throat while he could not stop me. My prancing steeds, trained to harness, plunged into their welling blood as into a river. The wheels of my battle chariot were bespattered with blood and filth meaning the insides, their intestines, right? I filled the plain with corpses of their warriors like herbage. You'll see this if you ever look at the Matthew Brady photographs of like Antietam. Like, since battles have to mostly take place on open fields, open plains, if you take a wide angle view, they look like a farm with lots of like cabbages and pumpkins and these little roots and all around. And when you get up close, you realize those are parts of people. So I filled the plain with corpses of their warriors like herbage. And again, remember, most people are farmers. So he's making a reference people understood. The fruit of the land is their cousin's dead body. On the sack of Babylon, I opened Babylon's treasure house, gold, silver, precious stones of every kind, goods and property without limit, heavy tribute, his harem, his courtiers, and officials, singers, male and female, all of his artisans, as many as there were, the servants of this place I brought out, I counted as spoil. Meaning, I enslaved them. They're mine now. In the might of Ashur, my lord, 75 of his strong walled cities and 420 small cities and their environs, I surrounded, I conquered, their spoil I carried off. Look at how exhausting that is. Capturing 420 cities, one by one. It's exhausting. You have to fight in each of these. You have to roll in. You have to then sack them, take their stuff, burn them down. You have to take the money and then collect it and then divide it between all your troops. It's exhausting. It's a lot of work. You could have just stayed home and played video games. Okay, not video games. Chess. You could have just stayed home. Instead, look at what he's doing. It's exhausting, the work. And why are they doing it? Out of hatred, out of fear of others. So what is the problem with the Assyrian Empire? The problem, the backlash, is people hate you. The problem with terrorism as a tool is it works for a little while. It scares people for a little while, but they hate you. They don't just want to defeat you, they want to destroy you. The Assyrian Empire thus needs constant violence to defeat constant revolts. This is the slave owner dilemma, which we'll talk about in by 102. We'll also talk about it for the Romans as well and the Spartans. So we're going to talk about it over and over and over again, but you can't free the slaves because they hate you for your violence. But keeping slaves means more violence, which perpetuates the hatred. Thomas Jefferson once described slavery from the slave owner's perspective as holding the wolf by the ears. You don't like it, but you don't dare let it go. Because you're worried the wolf will eat you. That if you release the slaves, the first thing they will do is murder you. So since we're not all Assyrians right now, what happened? Well, see, that system of violence and terrorism only works as long as the system stays the same, as long as the variable stays the same, as long as nobody becomes tough enough to fight back. And that's what happened in the 16s. 1612, 1614, 1615. New peoples came from Central Asia into the Middle East. The Medes and their little cousins, the Persians. They showed up and they come looking for stuff. Well, what did people say? They said, we don't have anything. The Assyrians have taken it all, but we'll help you get it back. And the Medes say, great, who are these Assyrians who think they're so tough? Now, here's the thing. The Medes and the Persians are cavalry. They're not on chariots. They're on horses, which means they are an all-terrain vehicle. They could go in the mountains. They could go on the plains. Chariots are stuck on highways. They are stuck on flat earth. The horse, on the other hand, could go anywhere. So suddenly, the military balance has changed, and everyone revolts. The Babylonians, of course, have money, so they give out all the weapons. The Egyptians revolt and invade the Middle East. You end up with a series of disasters for the Assyrians that end up with Nineveh being besieged by a giant allied army. The only thing I could describe it as is the Battle of Minas Tirith in The Lord of the Rings. Except in the Battle of Minas Tirith, the good guys are on the inside and the bad guys on the outside. Here, it's the opposite. The good guys are on the outside and the bad guys are on the inside because they had completely lost. The chickens had come home to roost. They had conquered people and murdered the Hebrews. They committed a genocide against Assyria, against Israel. The 10 lost tribes of Israel. They had obliterated other peoples who we don't even talk about. And so what those people wanted was revenge. What the people left behind wanted. What the Babylonians wanted. What the Phoenicians wanted. Was the complete destruction of the Assyrian peoples. And that's what happened in 612. Nineveh is depopulated. They break into the city and they just murder everybody. Enslave who they can, murder who they can't. Xenophon, the Greek general and philosopher who was with the Greek army in the middle of the Persian Empire, comes across Nineveh on his way out of the empire, comes across the city. He doesn't know it's Nineveh. He finds an abandoned ruin. No one lives there but howling dogs. And this is 200 years later. It's like the ruins you find in Dungeons and Dragons if you play a role-playing game or you play Elden Ring. Or Elden Ring. The Elder Scrolls or Elden Ring. You come across these ruins that are, once a great civilization. Xenophon and his Greek army came across Nineveh. Nobody lived there. An entire city was abandoned. The Assyrians were forgotten by history. Literally, if we did this class 150 years ago, I would talk about the Assyrians as fictitious boogeymen of the Old Testament. There's no evidence that they existed. There's no evidence that they're so bad. I know the Hebrews keep telling us they're terrible people, but, the Hebrews like to tell about God sending bad things to happen. I mean, every book has God sending bad things to happen. So it's just one of those different kinds of punishments. Oh, well. And it's not to the 20th century that people learned how to actually read Babylonian. And then once they started to read the cuneiform Babylonian, they were able to then read what they discovered was Assyrian. And not only did the Assyrians exist, not only did they write stuff down, it turns out that the Assyrians were worse, as I just read to you, than what we thought they had been. So what is the world after Assyria? The world after Assyria is traumatized. It is completely traumatized. It is a world that is now at war. Why? Because nobody wants another empire to rise like the Assyrians. So the response to the progress of unification, and we can make the argument that the Assyrian Empire was progress, because it unified all these people. It brought them together. It didn't make them Assyrian. But it sent money to Nineveh. It sent workers to Nineveh. It sent stuff to Nineveh. It combined all of these people who had been in separate little empires. They were now in one world empire, whether they liked it or not. Well, the response, the backlash to the mass unification of the Near East was that it shouldn't happen again. No single empire should ever dominate again. And so you have 4 states perpetually at war with each other to prevent another empire. Or, if it has to happen, it's going to be theirs. So you get Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar, which has military power. They take their trade and technology advantage, and they use it for military power. Nebuchadnezzar will conquer Jerusalem, pick up the Hebrews, and use them as slaves. This is called the Babylonian captivity. The Lydians are the new Hittites. They will occupy the mountains where the minerals are of Asia Minor, and they will invent coinage. And they will be rich. The Croesus, 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 the king of Lydia, Croesus becomes the name for gold in the Near East. As rich as Croesus. It's like Carnegie or Rockefeller. His name just meant gold. Kind of like Midas, the Midas touch. They're kind of the same. Midas and Croesus are kind of the same character. Egypt has the Nile and has food. So they have an unlimited amount of money because people need food and the Egyptians are willing to sell them food. And then now there's the Medes, who have their connection to Afghanistan, to Central Asia. They can bring in more horse peoples. They can bring in new manpower and horses from Central Asia, from the nomads. They could bring in their crazy cousins to wreck things in the Middle East, which means the Middle East is expanding. When we started, it was a couple of cities on the Persian Gulf, way in the south. Then it went upriver to Babylon. Then it went upriver to Assyria and across the desert to the Levant. The Hebrews, the Phoenicians. And it went across the mountains to the Hittites. And it went across a desert to Egypt. Now, we're going to talk about the Egyptians later. And now, it's all the way to India, to the Indus River, to the mountains of Afghanistan. Through what is now the Persian Plateau into Mesopotamia. So, civilization is expanding out and up. Okay, thank you, and be safe.